Welcome to Banking on Community, a podcast that explores how community banks thrive with the leaders who run them. I'm your host, Deb Barnes, a banking strategist and AI advisor with 18 years in banking and financial services. I help banks transform through data, analytics, and automation. Today's guest is Susan Desgrosseilliers. She's a VP Commercial Loan Officer at Skowhegan Bank in Southern Maine. She herself has an entrepreneurial background with 2 successful businesses, been in the real estate development space, and a community leader as an active board member of Maine Coast Fishermen's Association. Thank you for joining us on Banking on Community. Hi, Susan. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Deb. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm so glad you're here. We'd love to kick it off with a quick intro about yourself and about the bank that you work at.
Sure. So my position with the bank is Vice President Commercial Loan Officer, and I am not from the banking industry. I was a business owner for over 25 years. I also, after I sold my business, I worked as a business advisor, and I also held the position of Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce. So I've done a number of different things, which has really lent me to some real hands-on, practical, and professional experience that I think really works well when working with a business customer that's looking for financing for their business. And really, it's because I've been in their seat so many times, or I was in the past. So, but interesting enough, most of the commercial lenders here at Skowhegan Savings have had some business ownership experience. Our Senior Vice President of Commercial Lending actually is still an owner of a business. And Steve Thomas, who's our Senior Vice President of Commercial Lending, and many Saturdays and Sundays he will be working at his business, which is a car wash, just making updates, changes, whatever he has to do. So we have a really good team that understands what it is to be a business owner, which is basically a lot of hard work. As I mentioned, I'm with Skowhegan Savings, which is also, I think, an interesting story. The bank was founded about over 150 years ago by what we call a group of really hardworking Mainers. There were 2 brothers, Abner and Philander Coburn. They founded A&P Coburn, which was a very traditional business back in the day, which was a logging company, which was alongside the Kennebec River, which back then meant floating logs down the river to the mill, the sawmill, to be, sawed up into useful lumber. But these hardworking employees of A&P needed a place to store their hard-earned money. There weren't any banks around, so the Coburns established a bank for their employees. And it's kind of neat also because our mission at the bank is really, it's making our communities a better place to live and work, which was true, 150 years ago when the bank was founded. We're not a huge bank, but we do a lot of business. The bank has grown to just over 840 million in assets, healthy. We have a capital base of over 100 million, and we've got 12 branches, and I say only have 140 employees, which I also think is unique because we don't have a lot of layers at our bank. So especially when working on the commercial side, it's a very smooth process. We try to make it a really smooth process for our customers, I think, because of some of the experiences that we've had as business owners, but because there's not a lot of layers, which is really nice. So there aren't a lot of different departments for the loan application to kind of process through. We all work together, and we really do all have a really great time working together. Nice. It's a nice place to bank. It's a nice place to work, for sure. So that's a little bit about me. And I'm a lifelong Mainer, was born here, and grew up on the coast. And so I love Maine, and it works for me working here, for sure.
Well, that's a fantastic intro. So I loved the kind of symmetry between the current leadership of the bank, who have the small business background, and the Coburn brothers, who were business owners who became bankers. So it's kind of like a legacy of the company, it seems like.
Absolutely. I mean, our outgoing president, who is now the CEO, is also a business owner. So we
It's part
understand how
of
to.
the DNA.
Yeah, exactly. It certainly is. But it's not uncommon in Maine for Mainers to have more than one job. So that's pretty common here as well.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So are you or the bank working towards any major growth targets or strategic shifts over the next 1 to 2 years?
Well, so I work in the Southern Maine location, which is in Portland, and I believe they opened this branch or this location maybe 5 years ago. So they've been working on kind of developing a foothold in Southern Maine. There are a lot of banks here, but I think we've really started to kind of take off. We've been working on some really successfully have worked on and closed some very significant loans. In Southern Maine, some really interesting ones. We're seeing a lot of some of the commercial loans that are getting ready to reset existing loans that are with other banks. When those loans were taken out, we were at historically low rates, and those are getting ready to reset. We're seeing customers looking to possibly switch banks, refinance. I think the banking industry as a whole is going to see a lot of that. There's still a lot of growth and activity in the commercial real estate market. We do a lot of loans for business acquisition, hospitality industry. I mean, one of the interesting projects that I worked on recently had to do exactly with that, affordable housing. It's 20 condominium units and it's modular built. So, yeah, so we're starting to see a lot of movement and growth in the commercial modular sector. Of course, single family homes, that's been going on for quite some time now. So there's a lot of it going on across the country, but I think it's just going to continue to grow. So,
What are the biggest challenges or constraints you're facing right now?
yeah, well, I would say, the biggest challenge would be the rates that were experienced a few years ago, right? And now rates have gone up. Personally, I can remember when I started my business and rates were up in the 10% range, and now we're, in the sixes, sixes, seven, to me, that's reasonable. But when you're holding a note that's 3.99 for a commercial loan, it's getting ready to reset. So that's going to be a challenge for everybody, for the business community, for the banking industry. I'm sure we're going to all, we're going to get through it because it's not double digit changes. So we're working really hard with our customers on that, and then new customers as well. So I see that, that definitely is a challenge. And then the affordable housing, which covers not just low income, but also moderate income, which is what that condo project is. Actually, it's geared to moderate income individuals because, we're here in Portland. And if you have a job in Portland, very often you cannot afford to buy a property here. So that particular project was designated to really help with that market. And so I think that's going to continue to be a challenge and a lot of work, but one that I know we are spending a lot of time really not just researching it, but talking with the folks that are really involved, developers, contractors, all of those that would be part of putting together a project. So we're listening to them as well as to what they're experiencing and how we can, be part of it, as well as working with Maine State Housing and some of the economic development offices throughout the state. Those are some of the things that we're facing.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Any other big industry trends that you're seeing? Is there a wave that everyone's trying to ride right now, or something that, consumer behavior changes or anything like that is changing in your particular neck of the woods?
Well, and now I'm speaking for Southern Maine, one of the areas looking back at commercial real estate is the need and the lack of available commercial warehouse space. And so that's something that, and I believe we are as far as availability, it's less than 1% available space in Southern Maine. So developers are looking for the opportunity to either purchase existing commercial warehouse space or to build. And when they are building, they're really being smart about it. Of course, we learn every year as we go on in any industry. And so, they're looking at making sure that they've got really high ceilings, that they've got large door access, that, there's a lot of things that they're considering as they're speccing new builds for commercial warehouse space, and allowing it to be more fluid so that they can tailor it towards the specific tenant that might be interested in taking that space. So that's definitely something we're seeing. We also are dealing with some issues with rent caps, which make it difficult obviously for the rental property owners, because, as rates go up and taxes go up and insurance goes up and repair costs and construction costs, all of that goes up. In the normal course of business, you would pass some of those costs on to the consumer. And in this case, the consumer is the tenant. And so it's a difficult situation because the tenant is struggling to, make to afford the rent as it is. And then we've got the multi-unit family owner investor that is trying to weigh out increasing rents, and there's rent caps. So that's a really hot topic. And we've got a lot of Airbnbs that were homes that were purchased, taken out of the real estate market and put out as Airbnb. So that pulls away from available housing as well. And these aren't, this isn't new or just unique to us, but we're definitely dealing with those challenges as well.
Fascinating. So it's a big availability challenge, both on the commercial warehousing side as well as the, individual residential side.
And apartments, or we've seen some really nice new builds for rental units in Southern Maine that have all kinds of amenities. I mean, really, really nice amenities. But of course, those amenities come at a higher cost on the monthly rental rate. So again, it's a challenge for sure. For I think that developers are just always seen as the bad guys, and they're really not, from my perspective. I mean, there's always bad guys.
Trying to solve a gap.
But yeah, I mean, we can't have new units and new property if we don't have developers working really hard to put it together, and they can't do it without making a profit. When I was a business advisor and I would talk to someone would come in and meet with me about starting a new business, and we'd talk about pricing. Well, I'm not too good. I said, okay, well, unless you are financially independent or you're doing this as a hobby, don't even bother going into business, because if you're going into business, you need to make money, right? To support yourself and whatever. So anyway.
Makes a lot of sense. And, they also create jobs as well.
That's
these folks. So it's
absolutely.
all those parts, but there's, many perspectives on
there are. It's really tough. It's tough for everyone, really.
Yeah. So what do you see from kind of your role or your side of that equation? Like, what's creating any friction, or what's going slower than you want it to kind of help serve that community? And what do you wish could go faster, within your processes?
Well, I think any commercial loan officer that you would speak to would say, oh, I wish approvals would go through faster, even though we don't have a lot of layers. I mean, no, you can never have an approval, a decision fast enough. So that's just, beside itself. But as far as challenges, I personally am always looking for ways to develop new pathways that make like even the application process easier. So, I didn't like when I was taking out commercial loans, if I was working with the lender and they would ask me some questions and then, okay, I think we're all good and the loan has been submitted. But then they come back and they ask me all kinds of other questions that have come back from credit, right? That was always saying, well, these came back from credit, so we need to know. And they were all questions that I thought, why weren't these asked in the beginning? Because now it's holding up the loan. So I've really worked hard to make sure that I ask a lot of questions and I explain to the prospect or the customer as to why I'm asking these. And if you go through that with them, they get it, because really that's what holds up a lending decision if we don't have all of the pieces. So, one of the things that I do is I've developed a couple of different process, just basic, but it's just on collecting information that would make it easier to gather the information from the customer. Easier for them, easier for us, because it's not only myself that will use the information, but then there's others within the bank that will use the information as well. So by providing it all in one place, it just keeps everything working smoother for sure. So that's, I guess I would say that's one of the things that I personally have been focusing on.
And do you feel that, those customers coming in, they kind of expect to have to provide all that information, or is that a surprise, or
Not for
how does it
commercial.
depend?
Yeah, I haven't experienced that really on the commercial side. And that's why I think, as a business owner, unfortunately you're kind of conditioned and used to the fact that they're going to ask you for, whatever it is you're doing, they're going to ask you for everything, right? So we can't really get around the things that we need, which are, tax returns and personal financial statements and beneficial owner forms, environmental questionnaires, and all of these different things. But if we can make the process smoother and also let them know what our expectations are up front, meaning, I'll send out a list after, I meet the client, start working with them. These are all the things that I'm going to need to have a complete application, right? So that as soon as you can send them to me as you get them, and I tell them you're driving the bus. So, we can go as fast or as slow as it works for you, right? So, but I need all of this information for me to have a real complete application. So I think it's really about the message and understanding what it feels like to be in that position. And part of that is just trying to come up with a process and make it, like I said, as smooth as we can for our customers. And the other thing that we do that to me was unique, again, I'm not from the banking industry, but I was a business owner and I hadn't experienced this before, which what we do here is if I'm your lender, I'm your contact for everything. So it doesn't mean that I'm going to open a personal checking account for you as a business owner, right? Because we hope that's one of the things that you want to do, not just your commercial banking here. But you're going to call me and I'm going to take care of setting it all up. And then we again, because we don't have lots of layers, it's going to be Linda right here in Portland that's going to take care of it. If you want to add merchant service to your accounts, it's going to be Angel who oversees all of that. So you're never going to call, and our phone systems aren't set up that way. Press 1 for this, 2 for that. Like that's not how we work. So you always see marketing and you're always told that banks that it's all about relationships, but we really are. So I've become definitely friends with some of my customers in the sense that I really want to see them do well and succeed. And everybody else at the bank feels that way too about the loans that we take on. I've heard a lot of stories about internally about customers coming up against a wall that we saw before they even got to it, because we have to look at their financials every year and everything. And so then we've been very proactive to go out and have a conversation with them. And we can't advise them what to do, but we can tell them what we see, right? Rather than waiting for them to hit that wall and then saying, sorry, we got to call this no, or something like that. So from relationships are huge, and it's something that we really do take a lot of pride in. And we're very involved in the community, and all that kind of stuff as well is really important. Most of us serve on some sort of committee or board, and it's not about being on the right board. It's about what's interest to you. So like I'm on the Maine Coast Fishermen Association board. I grew up on the coast. I knew many families that were fishermen, fishing families, 4th, 5th generations. It's definitely an economic driver for the state of Maine. So it's important to me, and the bank is like, absolutely. And this is the only branch that we really have that's on the coast. You know what I mean? So the bank is really good about supporting us in supporting our interests in the community.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah. Community forward every way you can go, right? It's like relationships first, community first, both from the direct within the business and how it operates, but also in how it supports the employees of that bank, right? Of all of you and what your interests are. That's a great story. It's like just so focused on human interest,
We really are. Yeah.
That's great.
And internally we really do all have such a great time working together. I'm looking over at my phone because of course, we have those screen phones where you can see when you're talking to the person. And I had a call from one of the people in credit today that I hadn't talked to in like maybe a week or so, which is a long time. And she's like, I just had to call and say hi because I haven't talked to you in so long.
That's great.
Yeah. So it's that kind of environment.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit to the future. Kind of where are you looking out, a year, maybe 18 months from now, where does the bank want to be? Where do you want to be? What are some big goals or priorities that would look like a big success, right? If you accomplish that.
Again, speaking for the Southern market, because it's still, somewhat new. One of the things that we took on early on was cannabis lending, right? So we are one of the very few banks. There's credit unions that have taken on cannabis, but we're one of the only banks, mutual savings bank, that lend into the cannabis industry right from the beginning. Well, not right from the beginning, but very early on. I mean, I think they've been doing it for as close as you can come to the beginning of the industry, if you will. So we have a lot of deposit customers that are cannabis related businesses here in Southern Maine. And one of the things that we're working on is really getting out into the community and we're successful at it, is bringing in other deposit relationships, right, on the business side. Because a lot of people didn't even know we were here because we're Skowhegan Savings. And I'm sure you're not familiar with the towns in Maine, but Skowhegan is about 2 hours from here, northwest, right? And we're down here in Southern Maine on the coast, and we're surrounded by so many banks. So really great banks too, right? So we're working on building up our relationship and our deposits in this area. I'm obviously working on developing the commercial loan portfolio here in Southern Maine. And as part of that, we're becoming more involved in the community as well. I live here, so I'm very involved anyway, but the bank has been really great about, what do you think we need to be involved in, Susan? It's not like, why, could you please do a report and provide this and that? It's okay, let's do it. We've been very, very active in, we just hired a business development representative to really work out in the community. And Maine is an interesting state. It's kind of like, who do you know kind of thing. And, oh, I played hockey with this person, or I went to school with that person who's related to you through this person. And then it's like, well, your family, basically.
Who knew?
Yeah, exactly. So it's special. But I think I would say that's really what we're focused on. We're just really focused on building our foothold here in Southern Maine. And then all of the other branches that so there's, I think, 12 branches. They have such a great base in their existing communities already that they don't have to work on that.
Like, we got it. We're in.
Great, exactly, which is great. But I'd say that's really what we're focusing on.
That's
here.
Great.
Yeah.
So if you could solve one thing right now, what would you solve or unlock for the bank?
Boy, if I could solve one thing, I think it would be to let people know we're here. Honestly, as I am out in the community and, what are you doing, Susan? Well, I work at Skowhegan Savings Bank. Where is that? I didn't even know there was one here. So if I could magically if our bank could be recognized by the people in the community, that would be great. But also to be recognized, not just as another bank, but for all the reasons that I just told you, which really takes time. So as much as I'd like to solve that overnight, it's gonna take a while, but I think it's worth it.
That's fantastic. Okay, so then we're about at the point to wrap up, and I always like to give the guest the opportunity. If there's anything you wanted to mention that we didn't talk about, here's your chance. If you have any final thoughts.
Yeah, I guess I would just say that we're kind of all into this together. We're going through some changes, especially with the rates. And this is on the residential side too. We do a lot of residential loans, and we have someone right here. That's all she focuses on. Well, that isn't all she focuses on, but that's a big part of her focus. And, sometimes we forget that, I'm not just somebody working at a bank, but I also, own a home, and I have a family, and I own a business or owned a business. And so when I say we're all in it together, we really are. So I think if we can all keep that in perspective, it'll help, help us through anything, really.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Susan, so much for telling us all about your experience, about Mainers in general, and what you're doing to help your local community. That's a great story.
Great. Thank you.
Glad to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. It's been great.